All right, so here we are, podcast number three, podcast number three. Vance, thanks for staying with us
Yeah, what's up, man?
and staying focused. I love it. You're just,
Yeah, I'm focused in on this one.
yeah, it's a good one. Interestingly enough, listen, a lot of the stories, the Placebo Journal, well, 99% were not mine, but this comes from, I'm going to tell a story. I'm not actually going to read it, I'm going to tell it. I think it will talk more about, it's about med school a little bit, but this was the issue. It was the 2002 issue, and your personal growth is nothing to sneeze at. Has a big nose with little PJ, whatever polyps, and so
Can you believe it's been 22 years
that's
ago, man?
22 fucking years ago. Oh my God.
That's
So
crazy.
and so this story, you have to do the Wayne's World. It goes to, this is 30 years ago, 1993. 19, and that's and so here's how it goes. I'm a third year and I'm on OB. I don't know what I'm going to do for a living. I'm OB rotation. I told you before, Lyndon B. Johnson County Hospital was just the Wild West, right? So I mentioned it before, but I actually reread it, that I remember seeing someone getting breech twins being delivered. They just ran and they came in the ER with breech twins hanging out, and they were able to pull that off. Okay, no anesthesia, just on the bed. That's the kind of stuff I saw. But OB was insanely rough rotation. And it wasn't like it was a cowboy mentality, right? People say, oh, good old boy. It wasn't boys, it was women too. Whoever was the head resident, you saw the attending for an hour, right? But you saw the resident, and the women were worse. They would just brutalize you on this rotation. So you would get there at 5. And this is a dangerous place, right? So women had to be mostly, if they in the dark, they had to be escorted out to their car because of violence that was going on, right? Because you don't want anybody staring you down when you're coming out of your car. You don't know what's going to happen, and that's the kind of stuff going on in that hospital. So the rotation was brutal, and I got beat up a lot. So it was 36-hour calls in med school. So today they don't do that, right? I mean, they're not doing 36 hours as medical students.
Not as
Um,
students.
no, not even residents. They're holding them back on the hours, I believe. I'm sure they're playing around with
They
that. But
are. What happens is I think a lot of residents fight against it, and they do the long shifts anyway because they have stuff
right.
to learn, and they
And,
probably
and that's the
falsify their
thing,
work
though.
hours
So
to
my criticism of this is not really of, I love the learning, right? It was incredible learning. You get some rotations which suck, and as a medical student, you want to just eat that stuff up and learn and do things. So they would scut work you. For people don't know, they would just make you do unbelievable cleaning blood, pulling blood, cleaning gross things, whatever you had to do to make you work. So I'm on my OB rotation. So and I'm not sure this is, it's an interesting story more than a funny story. So I'm on my last week, and I get this guy named Joe, who's the chief resident, and he is an absolute dick. Okay, he's 6'2", pretty boy, multiple affairs, even though he's married. Just the girls would just swoon over him, but he fucking hated me. Okay, and he was going to torture me. And there was no interactions. Only time I was on with him one night before my last night, I did tell him I had past histories. Now, my past history is not normal for a person in medical school. I went to UVA, but I wrestled Division One. I actually boxed in college. I was an All American, took third. Then I went to Houston to become a pro. Was realizing like getting hit, but I mean, I worked with pros. I sparred with middleweight champs. I mean, I wasn't great, but I can hold my own. And I told some of my history with this guy because I worked with this organization, this boxing organization, for a few years, and some of the major fights I was in. So he knew my history, but he just said he hated me more. So he would just rip me. For that last week, it was torture, and he would mock me. And then even on the last night of call, he would page me every time he said, "You can go to bed." 15 minutes to get him a pencil, and I'd have to get up and get
yeah.
him a pencil. I'd go
I
back
had
to
a
bed.
resident like that when I was a student. Man, that's the worst. I've been through that exact same thing.
Unbelievable. Well, so here's where it turns. So I decide, okay, you know what? I'm done. I got to get a good grade. So I finish up, and I said, okay, I'm done with this guy. And I go to the head of the OB, the head guy. This guy's a major player in the world of OB. And I said, listen, this guy, I bet it's a cowboy world. I said, this guy's been doing this. I don't want him to do anything else to me, or I don't want you to tell who the guy is. I'm not going to mention his name, but you should really tell me what to do because others are going to be tortured by this guy. Well, he goes, well, if I was you, I would in a southern, I would handle this man to man and on your own. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm like, all right, I'm not going to do anything. I'm done. I'm going to surgery rotation. And on surgery rotation, like the first week, happen to be going by the OB area, and there's this motherfucker with his new group, and he stops that our group who was walking by, and it says, "Hey, little Dougie, how you doing? Are you tired? Are they working you too hard?" And like all this group's giggling and laughing, and then we stop, and he starts going some more. What's the matter, Doug? You got a little problem? Didn't like working hard? And he just continues to mock me. I'm like, all right, okay, that's it. Now I'm done. I'm off his rotation. The grades are in. He can't do anything, and I let this fester. And then I said, not doing this anymore. So I stalk him, and I find him in a hallway on the OB floor one time by himself, and I run over there. Now he's 6'2". I'm 5'7" and a half, but doesn't matter because I am fuming. I said, "Listen, dude, yeah, what's the problem?" I said, "If you ever fucking talk to me again, say a goddamn word, I will beat the living shit out of you. And you better hope somebody's around, okay? Because I'm gonna beat you till you're dead. And I will not stop until they pull me off." And he starts crying. What did I do? What did I do? I said, "You know what you did. You say you constantly mock me. I'm done with your rotation, and you continued. So I'm telling you, this is your last chance. You're risking your life if you ever say a word to me at all." So as that, he starts literally crying. "What did I do? What do I do?" Like, come on, dude. Now you're a tough guy, right? It's unbelievable, right? Some guy's a tough guy. You get in his face. So I walk down the hallway. I turn right, and then another resident starts seeing him crying. And then they start talking. And then the other resident runs down the hallway and screams down the hallway to me, "Show some respect." And I'm like, yeah, fucking right. Show some respect. So I'm in the dean's office the next day. Okay. Because I got sent to the dean.
Of course.
And the dean says, yeah, this is a major problem. So we're gonna have to, you can't be doing that, blah, 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 blah. So they send me to the OB, head of OB again, another head of OB, not the one I saw before. And he says, "Listen, you're gonna need to do some anger counseling. This was totally inappropriate." I said, "You got it." And that was it. They let me off. I was done. But the best part was I would wait in the parking lot and wait for this guy to walk out. And all I would do is just stare at him and just keep staring at him as he walked by and just stare at him. And he would look at me and walk away. There's your respect. That's the garbage that was going on. That probably doesn't happen again much today. But the beauty was he got what was coming to him. I think I scared the living crap out of him, and I would have killed him too. I swear to God, dude, you're not going to sit there and mock me. I'm not going to live my life walking around. Hopefully, I don't see him, so he can mock me in front of his minions. What was your story with your resident?
Well, yeah, just real quick. You said that, you wonder if that happens as much, these days with, resident students
I
or
don't think it
residents and chief
does.
residents or attendings of residents or whatever the pecking order is. I I think the pecking order still exists. I'm pretty far removed from academia. I'm out here in the rural areas. I still teach, but I just, one on one, they send a student out here one at a time, and it's, we have a really we have a great rotation where the students are treated like equals, and we give them an opportunity to really see what they can do and stuff. We don't have that. I always call it education by fear and intimidation, and in your case, like belittling and all that. Like, I
Yeah,
never thought that was a good way of doing things, but I think that still happened. Now, whether it's as bad as it was, I don't know. It definitely was a real thing in my day as well. I trained after you, but it was, more than 20 years ago now or whatever. So I don't know. The story, my resident story is similar. It doesn't have the same ending with me threatening
yeah,
the
because
life of a resident.
you're 6'7".
Also, the resident that treated me that way was a female, and you
Okay.
can't just go like
No, no,
threaten
no,
the
you
life
wouldn't
and
do that.
limb
No, no,
of a diminutive woman when you're
right, right,
a
right,
Sasquatch like me. So,
right.
but it was the same thing. It happened to me twice. With one resident, it was a surgery resident who had a reputation for just being super mean to everybody, and she was just so mean to me. And I don't know if I've told you the story. We didn't publish this story. It gets my emotions going so much that I don't think I ever wanted to put it in the journal. But um, it started on the very first day of my third year rotation, which happened to be my first surgery rotation. We're in the surgical ICU rounding, and the way they did things, they paired us off with two students and one resident. And so it was funny because I'm, as you know, many of our readers know, I'm 6'7". At the time, I was 320 pounds, and they put me with the other student who was this really short Indian girl who was like 5'10", like or 4'10". She was like 90 pounds, and people joked around because the biggest and smallest medical students
Right,
was our
right, right,
team, and they put us with this particular resident, and she was a third year surgery resident who was just so mean. She always had this chip on her shoulder, like she had something really hard to prove. And and she wanted us. I'm gonna be honest. She just wanted us to say good things and stroke her ego, which was insatiably hungry. Like there was no amount of ego of 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 accolades that she could be given that would be sufficient to make her feel
right,
adequate. She had a major insecurity problem. And so anyway, we were on rounds. It was the very first day of my third year rotation. And we were on the surgical ICU. We see this patient, and we're out there early in the morning. And one of the nurses, and a very experienced surgical ICU nurse in her 50s, she's been, an SICU nurse for, whatever, 20 or 30 years, tons of experience for all of us to humble ourselves and learn from, right? A medical student, even a resident, and an attending, we all can learn things from each other. Like we're not better than each other. Let's be a team. And this nurse was very good, and she knew her stuff. Well, to protect the innocent here or the guilty, we'll say that this resident's name was, we'll say it's Stephanie, and we make rounds, and we're on the wards there in the SICU, and this nurse walks up to us and she says, "Hey Stephanie, I just wanted you to know I left the bandages off of Mr. Smith in room 4 there because I know you guys are about to go see him, and then let me know when you guys are done with rounds, and I'll redress all of his wounds." It was very, very kind, very respectful, and very considerate because the nurse could have easily just redressed it, and then we'd have to go in and remove all the
right,
dressings five
right,
minutes
right.
later and all that.
Yeah.
And so we go in there, we see Mr. Smith in room 3, and we do our rounds, and then we move on. And like 30 or 40 minutes later, we've seen a couple of other patients, and we're half a mile down the hall, and this resident just stops in her tracks, like she glitched out of the matrix. She just stops, and then she looks at me and the other medical student, and she goes, "Is it me, or did that nurse just call me Stephanie?" Like
Of
a
course, the
half
first
an
name you
hour.
meant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, and so let's be honest. What did she want us to say? She wanted us to be like, "Oh yeah, what an
Yeah.
inconsiderate,
Right, right,
she doesn't know her place. How rude." She wanted us to feed that ego trip that, by
right,
God, you call her doctor, right? And remember, this is my first day of third year. I know the pecking order. I know it's my job to stroke her very fragile ego.
right.
That's not how I roll, man. There's just no way. I would never be able to live with myself knowing
Yeah.
that I fed that kind of hubris and that kind of pride, because it's
Right,
that kind of pride in physicians that kills people.
right,
I'm a firm believer we need to be able to admit that we are equal to other people, and what
right,
we don't know, say those words, "I don't know," all that. And so instead of stroking her ego, I permanently damaged my with one sentence, I permanently damaged my medical academic career because I knew it was going to hurt me. I mean, like I knew I was going to take some major damage from this, and I did it anyway. I said, "Quote: I can remember this like it was yesterday." I said, "Well, first of all, that was like 30 minutes ago." Because she goes, did that nurse
yeah,
just call me
right.
Steph?" I was like, "Well, first of all, that was like 30 minutes ago, and isn't that your name?" Oh my gosh, man, like, she turned the color of my shirt, smoke coming out of her ears, she went nuclear. "I did not go to medical school to be called
Right,
Stephanie, blah, blah, blah," and then she went off on she starts just praising herself with her academic accolades. Like, in our medical school, she went to the same med school I did, they have an award that's given in 2nd year during the didactics for the top student in the microbiology class. Don't know why, but some professor back in time made a trophy, some kind of $100, I don't know, whatever. That every year, whoever the top student is in microbiology wins this little trophy and gets $100 or whatever. It like I didn't know much about it. I didn't care. I knew there's no way I was winning the top micro.
Right. So
I
she, so
I don't.
Stephanie won it.
She won it when she was a second year. Like this would have been like 5 years, 6 years ago. She's like, I had to go to medical school to be called Stephanie, and I didn't win that thing and go all my to win that trophy in micro. I mean, just and me, all the things I did, and I was like, oh man, this is gonna be so bad. And so
It's,
from then on, it was on like Donkey Kong. It was like you said, like you got to study for your shelf exams during in between, like when you can
yeah,
find just a moment. Because back then it was every other night, all night call for
yeah,
trauma surgery, and then all morning you're in surgery. Before that, you're making rounds. You make rounds again afterwards. Like there's no time. And so like when you get a few minutes, like I got to go up to the call room and I got to study for the shelf exams coming up. Oh yeah, that's important. You should go do that. And I'd go up there, I'm way behind on studying. I get out all my stuff, and I mean, like clockwork. I mean, you could set your watch to it. This is before cell phones because I'm old, like
yeah. It's a
you, and
pager, right?
it was pager, right? So you
Yeah,
go up there and you could set your watch to it. I get my books out. I'd sit down at the desk in the call room and just get started into something, and then beep 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 beep, and it's on, and it's the resident. And she's like, well, I've been thinking. I really think we need to look at Mister So and So's labs again. Can you go back down and round on him again, or do this? So I was scut work of some kind every day. And I maybe I have my own problem with pride, but I refused to let her win. So I did it. Like I would do all the work
right. Well, you got no choice. You
and
can't
still try
fail.
to cram.
You're not going to
What's
fail.
that?
You're not going to fail. You have no choice but to do whatever they tell you to do. That's the thing people don't understand. It
Yeah.
literally, you will fail, and then you're in trouble. I mean, you got to redo it or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really bad. At
Do
the
you do
end,
you think
I
do you
talked.
think that
Go ahead.
because she's a, I could see, I'm not taking her side, but
Hmm.
maybe I'm just going to throw this out at you because this is the problem. Because surgery is tough for women, not for women, but
No, I get it.
it's a tough, it was a tough job to break into because it was a male dominated position. And especially 20, 30 years ago, women were not getting it. Like, luckily now it's probably even, but a lot of surgeons, it was a really, definitely, if you want to a cowboy, good
I
old boy
get that.
stuff. The other thing is, so for her to be on that was tough. And then I'm wondering if she's like, okay, maybe because she thinks that they call the other male doctors Dr. Smith, and they call her Stephanie because she's another woman, and that is, something that even the women nurses don't respect her enough. Maybe that was, I'm giving
Yeah.
pushback.
No, and my cousin was one of the nurses on the SICU, and she told me about like all the very very offensive nicknames all the nurses had for this resident. Like you're right, they all hate each other, and you're right. She's in a man's world and having to be defensive and all that. But it's more than just, oh, you have to call me Doctor Steph, Doctor whatever. I'll give you an example. One time we extubated a dude. This dude had been intubated for a couple of weeks. He'd been very sick. He's getting better. We finally get a chance to extubate him. And as you know, and many of our listeners or readers will know, like when you extubate someone who's been intubated for that long, like their mouth, their entire oral cavity is like the Sahara Desert. It's dry and parched and cracked. It's the worst. And you get that tube up out of your airway, and you can finally talk a little bit, and you can breathe, on your own. And like there is one thing that you want, and that's just a little bit of water. Like it's like being in the desert.
Right, right.
And we're standing in this room, and right outside the door of his SICU room is one of those machines that's like water and ice. Right there. Like it's 10, I mean, it's 10 feet away. It's right there, big stack of cups next to it.
Right.
And this guy's like, water, water, just, can I get a little water? And I mean, I'm 10 feet away. And I'm like, yes, sir, right away. I can,
Yeah.
even if it's just a swab thing or
Yeah.
whatever, well, you need some moisture. Absolutely, sir. And I turn around to go 10 feet away and get a cup of water for this dude. And Stephanie stops me and she's like, where the heck do you think you're going? And I'm like, this guy is the definition of parched. I'm just going to
Right.
get him a little bit of water. And she's like, that's the nurse's job. And
Yeah.
like, she wouldn't let me do it. And then another time we rounded on a dude. He wasn't in his room. We were in a hurry because we had to get to surgery, and he was down in radiology getting some kind of a bladder study done. So they had done the thing where they, put a ton of fluid in his bladder and pumped it up with some dye and stuff. And he is in the hallway having gotten this thing, and they haven't let him pee yet. And we go down there to round on. We're in a hurry because we got to get to surgery, and we need to do his exam. And this guy is in agony with like a basketball sized bladder, just asking, "Can I pee real quick before you round on me and do my exam and all that?" And she's like, You just have to hold it. We're doctors and we have places we have to be. And this poor guy was just trying to everything he could to not pee himself. And this attitude, it was that all of that. That's my point. It's not just the one thing
Yeah,
of,
yeah, yeah.
oh, I didn't go to medical school to be called Stephanie. I actually had this is back in the Palm Pilot days before cell phones. I had a Palm.
Right.
I actually had a notepad entry on my Palm in all caps. The title of the notepad was "Things I Will Not Do as a Doctor." And it
Yeah.
was by learning by negative example. I just wrote down behavior from that resident that I'm like, I'm not going to do that whenever I have a patient to serve, And to be fair, that's one way to learn, right? Learn how not to do it. But
It's
anyways,
interesting that I guess let me circle around. So yeah, I mean that's so we start with the guy that was the Mr. Ego with me, and
right.
I think I guarantee I'd change him. But so this is back in the '90s. You got to think this world of medicine has changed a lot for the better, sometimes a lot for the worse. But because you still need a
Hmm.
hierarchy in this other, so a pendulum always swings. Back in the '70s, so when I was in Maine, um, we Hawkeye, the guy who wrote MASH, Hawkeye Pierce, he was from Maine. He had been, I
Oh yeah,
think he had just
that's
died
Alan
back.
Alda's character, right?
Yeah, and so,
Yeah.
but Alan Alda was really a lot of fun. If you go to
Hmm.
the first movie, it's a little darker, and then he was
Yeah.
darker, and like
Yeah.
in residency, my one of the MAs, no, one of the nurses used to work for him. Like he was the most sexist, ass grabbing, just most inappropriate in the world. Right? He was a
Oh, you
very
mean the doctor that
yeah.
character is based on in real
He
life? Is that what you're
wrote
saying?
it. The guy who even wrote, I can't remember his name. He wrote Mash, and is on his
Okay.
and Mash was a true story. Most if
Hmm.
all of it was a true. And so one time he was such a rough dude. This is surgery, so they were like, I mean, this very. It wasn't, he was touchy feely Alan Alda character, not the real Hawkeye. And I remember doing
Hmm.
another rotation at the VA. Oh, I did it. Was it? It was no, it wasn't the VA. It was workers comp, and the old doctor there was a character in that book. He was in Vietnam with it was Vietnam. No, it was Korean War with Hawkeye, and they had been friends. And he says, "Dude, you have didn't say dude, but you have no idea what this guy was like and how. I mean, it
Hmm.
was." And he remembers he tried to get him at a job later on in life in workers comp, and so he got a job for the workers comp. And this is a true story too. 100%. The guy told me, lady came in, long story, wanting to get disability, and so whoever, I forget his name, the guy was Hawkeye. He got fired for this. It was the right. Yeah, it's like a 20-page report you got to do for disability. You know that, right? I mean, when you got to write those
Hmm.
forms up for someone disabled, this percentage
Yeah.
low, this percentage low. All he wrote was three sentences. Um, this lady comes in for disability for her hands. Period. Uh, Heck. Period. She can squeeze the tits off a yak. Period. Done. And they got fired. I say that inappropriately, whatever, but that's the true story. And that was just three sentences. They had to get rid of him. That's the guy from Met. I think he died pretty lonely. I don't know his full story. I don't. No one's ever written his full story. But the guy that was a character, I won't tell you his name in the book because it was actually a very offensive name now. But he was in that whole world, and we used to go there and talk about Mash. But yeah, this guy was just insane. That world, surgery world, is still insane. I'll bet you it's not that much better. It's got to be a little bit. I think there's more
Hmm.
women, which hopefully helps. But that was my OB is basically surgery rotation. They're surgeons first. I mean, I don't, especially the rounds we did. My surgery rotations were just as crazy, but not as threatening as when I had this dude. So yeah, I think people don't know how hard you freaking work in medical school, how much you get abused, and then at
Yeah.
resident, it's all on your shoulders. And I know I was much nicer to my medical students. I'm sure you are too, even
Yeah.
now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
that's how you change things. We had
Yeah,
fun,
that was like I said, the whole education by fear and intimidation. I mean, it works. I mean, that's how the SEALs train, right? That's how all of these,
right?
that's it makes you hard and all that. And I get it. It's not my preferred way of learning, and so I learned it. I learned it as a way not to learn. So I've run pretty much the opposite. Now I don't let students walk over me and just show up when they want. They still have, they're still expectations for,
Right, right,
how
right.
they get things done and all that. But I just wanted to learn how to say those words I don't know, and I'll be supportive and help them figure stuff out or whatever. I think it's a lot. Personally, I think it's a better way to learn. But I'm not saying that the old school ways don't work. And there's a reason the military does it that
Right.
way and stuff. And
Yeah.
I get it. Did
Yeah.
you ever run into that during your family medicine training? That's another unique place where you mentioned the OB training. Did you ever run into it during your OB training as a being, well, maybe at the time you didn't know what you were going to do.
Yeah, yeah.
But we ran into that. All of us who had already determined that we were going to go into family medicine whenever we were in medical school, we ran into a lot of that hostility from OB residents if they knew we were going to be family
Oh,
doc
no, they
doing
hated
OB.
you. Everybody hated you, yeah.
Yeah. Oh
No,
man.
you can never tell you were in family medicine because they look down upon
Right.
family medicine,
But see, again,
yeah,
I don't have that filter. I can't sit there and act like I'm
yeah,
somebody I'm not. Just like I wasn't going to stroke that other doctor's ego.
yeah.
Whenever we started our OB rotation, first thing the residents asked us on the first day was, what do you guys want to do? What do and I was like, I'm going to be a small town doctor and full spectrum. I'll be doing OB and everything. And so I'm really been looking forward to the OB rotation. And I mean, then the hate started flying because like family doctors don't have any business delivering babies, and
Yeah, oh,
and there's
no,
the
yeah,
turf war and all that.
yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
so now they weren't mean to me in the way that surgery resident was. They were just super hard, like, you're going to fail, you're not as smart as us, you can't do
Right.
the work we do or whatever. So all that did is harden my resolve to like bust my butt even more. And I worked, whatever, 17-hour days, day in, day out. Like, I
Yeah.
was the first volunteer for everything. I'm not trying to say I was a gunner, but I worked really hard because that's the clinics, and the clinics is where I shined anyway. Like, I wasn't ever a gunner on the front row during the didactic spinal clinics. I loved it. I loved actually being hands on. So
Right.
I remember during that OB rotation, these OB residents were so mean to me because I was going to be a family doctor in OB. And one time, I played basketball a lot with some of the doctors. The attendings in that town had a basketball league. They played twice a week, and I used to go play with them. And man, I sprained my ankle super bad one night, and like my ankle was just huge, swollen, dark purple all the way down my foot and all that. You can hardly walk on it. And I had to be, making rounds at 4:30 the next morning, getting ready for all that day's inductions and all that. Man, I got to the hospital early, and I didn't want to use a crutch or something because, again, you can't show any, you can't show
No,
weakness like
no.
at all. And this was just a basketball injury. It's not like anything that had to do whatsoever with medicine or,
Right, right.
but there's no weakness. And so, like, I got there and I'm making rounds before the residents get there. And you know how hospitals all have those big railings down the every hallway, and everywhere you go in a
You
hospital, there's a
use the
railing.
you were walking by
So I'm
breath.
walking along, I'm walking along using the railing to take some of the weight off my ankle because it's just so swollen and painful. And I'm walking
Oh,
along, and,
man.
and these two female residents that are pretty hard on me, they come around the corner, and I immediately stand up and I act like I'm not hurting. But like, when your ankle's that badly sprained, it's hard to walk normally and not
Right, right.
show some of the pain. And I mean, I was hurting so bad. And they're
That's
like, "What's wrong with
amazing.
you?" And
Amazing you
I'm
have
like,
to do
"Nothing."
that.
Yeah, they're like, "What's your problem? You're limping." I'm like, "No, no, I'm fine."
No, I'm not.
It's like you act like, and I did it. I did the whole 8-week rotation, and at the end of it, I mean, I think I proved myself. They gave me an A, and patted me on
Right.
the back and said, strong work or whatever. So it's not. They weren't. I don't think they were bad people like that surgery resident. They didn't like that turf battle between family and OB, I
No,
think.
my guy was a bad guy. I mean, he was
Yeah,
just like
exactly. Yeah,
he totally wanted to show that he was a tough guy, and then he had control. But and you know
yeah,
what? I got it. That so during the rotation, I sucked it up. He
yeah,
really tried to torture me. It's after the rotation where I'm done with
yeah,
you
yeah.
that
Right. That you did
and
that.
I literally would have threw fisticuffs to this guy if he even made a move more. I didn't care. I was stupid enough that I'm literally out of the boxing world 3 years. What
Yeah,
do I care?
yeah,
So I mean I didn't know anything. I really seriously so the guy thing getting anger therapy probably should have, but that's why the placebo journal occurred. But so
yeah. But I
you
think
know it's weird. It is what it is.
I
That's
think
just
part of
how I
that's
grew
being
up.
young, and we have our own stubbornness and our own. I
Yep.
mean, think about it. We're DPC doctors, right?
Yeah.
We bucked the system. We rebelled. We were rebels. We rebelled against the system. That we do have that stubbornness and pride streak, but it's a different type of pride than this just I'm better than everyone else type of thing. I think we have the humility where it matters, but at the same times we stand up for what's right. And I think you standing up to that guy after the rotation, you could have gotten in big trouble for that. I mean, you went to the
I
dean's
should have
office
been
and you
thrown out
didn't
of
have.
school. Yeah, yeah, I should
Yeah,
have been
and you
thrown.
could have been
Yeah,
easily.
yeah,
And I know stories that a lot of other doctors have told me of similar things where they almost cost them some decision they made like that, almost cost them their entire career.
correct.
And with me, like that surgery rotation, me standing up to that attitude on the very first day made my life an absolute hell, like for
But
months.
hopefully they
And
get the lesson.
I think I think we can all assume that downstream. Um, let's just think about it. A person like that. What's their life really like?
Yeah, no, I get it. Well, these are,
They're not
yeah,
happy people.
they're socially, uh, socially have inept, and this is their whole life,
Yeah,
and this strokes
yeah,
their ego, like you said, dude. Go. I'll circle back to what you just said. That's what the journal was. It was a pushback on the system. The stories are funny
yeah.
and the stories, but the stuff we did to mock. I'll talk about what we did to Cigna one time. I'll talk about some of
Cigna.
these. Yeah, Cigna, right? I mean the stuff on the parodies on the health insurance companies, dude. I just saw on LinkedIn some guy praising, because he works as a consultant, how Blue Cross is acquiring all these fast med urgent care clinics, which they'll be owning the doctors. I'm
Mhm.
like horseshit. I literally wrote horseshit. Insurance companies shouldn't be owning doctors. That's employing
Right.
doctors. There's no way that's ethical, appropriate, or good for the patient in any way. Did anybody
Right.
else say this? No. Yeah, if these people, patting, stroking this person's ego because he's very high up in Blue Cross or wherever he is. It's like, dude, someone's got to say something, and I don't care anymore. I'm retired. Okay, I can't
Hmm.
believe I got away with the Placebo Journal for being employed when I was for 20 years, and the Cigna almost got me fired. So we'll do that another time. That actually went to
Yeah.
lawyers,
I
but
remember that one.
yeah,
I
actually,
remember that you. That's the same thing. It's like you're gonna just say what's true,
yeah,
and you're not gonna be apologetic for it because like it's not like these are opinions. I'm just putting facts out there.
yeah.
And
But
but
we were funny
you step
facts.
on big toes. You step on very big toes.
Dude, these are some funny facts. So let me just tell you that there was an AP story about that. So Associated Press story about my attack from the Placebo Journal on Cigna.
Hmm.
So all right, we'll talk about that another time. You want to sum up anything?
I don't know. I'm good, man. It was a good topic today.
Yeah, I think it's
I
good.
will
Yeah.
tell if I don't know how many people are listening to this, but I'm working on something. I've told you a little bit about this. It's going to be a few weeks or even months till this comes out. But I have got a friend who is a PA, physician assistant. She's been working inside. She worked at a DPC that was a growing DPC, that was a pure DPC model, working with a lot of employers, and ultimately sold out to one of the big ones, which sold out to the biggest one,
Yes, I know who that.
and they
Yeah.
are nothing resembling DPC anymore. And this PA is so burned out that they reached out to me with all the details, and I'm in the middle of I've got a second interview with them coming up. I'm going to write a whole expose on it. It's going to show, it's going to be massive, in my opinion, to just show what happens whenever a DPC um, loses track of why they did what they did. Like when they just start going after money, it's
Yeah.
out of the frying pan into the fire. And this case is just, it demonstrates it so good. So anyway, it's a long kind of process
All right.
going through this. And
Well, we'll look forward to that in the
anyway,
DPC
it's coming.
news. Yeah, that'll be
Yeah, yeah,
good.
we'll put it in DPC news. It may be months away, but it's gonna be awesome.
All right. I will talk to you probably next week.
Yeah,
All right,
see you.
man.
Take care,
Good
man.
talk.
Yeah.